Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And if you don't mind, I would very much like to continue on with our journey and our discussions with respect to the feature film works of that brilliant and genius filmmaker and artist who is the one, the only, Mr. David Cronenberg. And today that brings us to a work which is described as being from the year 1981. And among its great cast, great cast, Jennifer O'Neill, Michael Ironside, Stephen Lack, Patrick McGoohan, Lawrence Dane, and others in this epic science fiction horror action film that is from the one, the only David Cronenberg, with all that suggests and brings with it. It is this film, which is Scanners. So, like we have been doing with the other David Cronenberg film discussions, what I'd like to propose is let's divide this up into two videos. This first video is a general impressions video, non-spoilers, for the benefit in particular for those who have not yet seen this film. And then in a following separate video, let us focus on more plot details, spoiler plot details. Again, I want to divide it up for this, just in case you have not yet seen this film, Scanners. And so to consider this in this general impression or general comments perspective, I suppose I could say that this is a film that is essentially setting up this concept within the cinematic space here, setting up this concept of telepathic abilities or certain people who through a certain prescribed set of circumstances that we will understand as we watch the film and as the plot unfolds, we meet certain set of characters that have mental telepathic abilities, and it's referred to within the space of this film as scanning, or the ability or power to scan, the idea of scanning or reading someone else's mind. Thus, people who have this ability are referred to as scanners. Thus is the title of the film, Scanners. And so this is in reference to or making note of this concept of people who have this power of telepathy, and they exercise it in many forms and permutations, and both in terms of using the scanning ability to try to solve a kind of mystery or make a type of inquiry, or to find or discover a certain plot of, say, a plot or controversy of some sort, or a type of a scheme, or a spy ring or something, or an underground resistance movement or terrorist group. So trying to unravel or unearth these details of pursuant to this inquiry on the one hand. There is also the use of the scanning powers in a very violent, confrontational way, thus leading to this concept or notion of this film also being regarded as a horror film. And indeed, for those who have not yet seen it, if you are into the works of David Cronenberg, you may have already encountered some other David Cronenberg films that have some intense, violent scenes, and scenes involving say horror and its effects on, say, the physical body, and also the traumatic emotional and psychological effects that are also involved, which makes and further intensifies the horrific experiences that are depicted or that are suggested through the works of David Cronenberg cinema. I bring up examples that we've discussed earlier, like, say, Shivers, or another film like The Brood, or another film like Rabid, as I think really prime examples of that, of at least the films that we have discussed up to now. So Scanners falls into that same mold or similar mold of using or relying on the metaphor of violence, and violence on the physical body, but also making that as a metaphor, again, for the landscape of Cronenberg's aesthetic. We are referring to it as the cinematic Cronenberg aesthetic. And it's the idea of a type of transhuman step of evolutionary proportions, the idea of the boundaries of a type of human existence and how those boundaries are tested and indeed broken to the point of maybe creating a new existence. We call this evolution. But in the propulsion forward of evolution, there are also always consequences, the old flesh versus the new flesh, in a manner of speaking. And so to get to the new flesh, one must discard the old flesh, and that is a form of violence. Well, this is, I think, one of the key components of the Cronenberg aesthetic that we have seen thus far. And it's not just the physical attributes and effects, but it's also the means by which, or the way in which the psychology or the emotional states I should say, are affected by this, or perhaps how the psychological and or emotional states are indeed too evolving in this transhuman way. Now, this is not. This is also to say that this theme, I think, is being supported and being embellished and explored in the hands of David Cronenberg through a work like Scanners, while also providing these action set pieces, chase sequences, and gunfights and the like. And so there is a share of action in this film, as well as the physical confrontations and the mental confrontations as well that form the set pieces of this in terms of science fiction and special effects spectacle. And indeed, there are many sequences that are very famous or infamous, depending on one's point of view, that really showcase this collision or this cross-section between the Cronenberg aesthetic on the one hand, in terms of the metaphor for psychological, emotional, and physical transformation, and the way in which we see how that is taken to an extreme, and the violent after effects of that in the form of, say, cinematic set pieces that could be said to be within the realm of science fiction, action, and horror. This is Scanners, I think, in a nutshell. Thus making it very compelling, very entertaining, and quite the David Cronenberg work indeed. And I should say, too, from a personal note, that this is a film from 1981. I was born in 1979, and so I grew up in the 80s, as I've mentioned in other parts and other videos on this channel. I grew up in the 80s, and so I grew up during the VHS era, or the VHS rental period era. And indeed, when I first saw this film, it was on VHS tape. It was on a rental tape. And I also found it I watched it when it was broadcast on TV, in a network TV edited down version of the film. And so I've seen it many, many times. And so I consider this a film that is one of the first Cronenberg films, if not the first Cronenberg film I ever saw. And in that regard, I look at it very fondly, very warmly, and with a strong sense and with a respectful sense, with a sense of that nostalgia. And in that way, I loved it then and I love it now. I thought it was cool then, and I still think it's very cool now. I thought it was a very intense, scary film then, and I still think now it is a very scary and intense film. Very intense indeed. And so it puts me on edge. And it makes me uncomfortable. But that's what the great David Cronenberg films do. They put one on edge. They make one feel truly uncomfortable, while also giving us these grand action set pieces, while also giving us this corporate intrigue, espionage, spycraft, in a manner of speaking, the underground movements and resistance movements, and the network of what's going on there, and the intricacies of betrayal and deceit, where things aren't all what they seem to be. And this makes for, I think, very fascinating content, very fascinating content indeed. So I have always loved this film, and I love it now, and I believe I will continue to love it for many years to come. And so it is my great pleasure to be able to share with you some very general comments about this film, Scanners, like I've tried to do now. And it'll be my great pleasure in a separate video to talk with more detail about this work, Scanners, going into specific plot points about this and trying to explain even further why I feel this way. So with that, my dear friends, let us leave this video for now, and then at the next video, let us pick up this conversation, but with more plot spoiler emphasis. So again, for those who have not yet seen this film, Scanners, if you are into the works of David Cronenberg, this is certainly a film that I would strongly recommend that you watch. If you've seen David Cronenberg films and you enjoy what you see, and if you understand that this is a work that is, again, very intensely within the genres of science fiction, action, and indeed horror, in a way that is very much a David Cronenberg work. If you are okay with that type of approach, then this film, I think, is for you. I really believe that, and so it has so many concepts of, as I say, corporate espionage and intrigue, and relationships between parents and affiliates. And I mean that in the corporate sense. I also mean that in the individual sense. And so, and also this notion of a type of a political or socio-political revolution as well, or the potential of a socio-political revolution, and what that means for the current power structures. And we've seen this in so many a Cronenberg film. And so in those ways, it is its own unique film in the Cronenberg canon, but it's also very much, very much a strong example of the Cronenberg aesthetic. And so for all those reasons, again, if you are into the works of Cronenberg and if you haven't seen this film yet, I strongly recommend it. This is one of the classic places to go when exploring the works of Cronenberg. So this is the film from 1981, which is Scanners. And with that, my dear friends, in a future video, as I mentioned, we will talk again about Scanners with more detail, more plot-specific detail. But until that next video, my dear friends, please be happy and healthy and well, and please keep on watching a lot of great movies. And so until the next one, my dear friends, thank you, be well, and cheers.